Excellent. Thank you, everyone. My name is Beth Worrell. I am part of the National AI Centre, which is part of the CSIRO. Before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge that we all meet today on the traditional lands of the Indigenous people of Australia. I'd like to pay my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people on the call today. And I'd also like to thank them for their amazing custodianship of the land in which we enjoy our lives today. I, as I mentioned, work for the National AI Centre. I wanted to quickly pause and reflect on the incredible year that we have had riding the wave of AI, and as many of you will have acknowledged and experienced this year as well, it's been an incredible year. For us at the National AI Centre, we've launched the Responsible AI Network, which has been a fantastic initiative, and that is the program that that we run as part of the National AI Centre, amongst others. But that's been an incredible campaign to bring people together to really talk about what it is that is responsible AI and what we can do together to advance that adoption of responsible AI in Australia. We've launched two major think tanks, so the Responsible AI at Scale think tank, as well as the AI Industry Forum, which are, again, additional ways that we can connect with our community in Australia and talk about how we can work together to move things forward. We are towards the end now, actually, of our National AI Month. So we've had over 70 events nationally that have spotlighted all of the activities and some of the programs that we have campaigned around to advance and excite and engage people on AI. Last week, we enjoyed a huge event in Sydney with nearly 400 people. The National AI Summit, which was a fantastic event. It was an event that we co-sponsored with CSIRO, and we were very lucky to have a number of global speakers join us, including people from the World Economic Forum and James Manyika, who is an incredible speaker from Google. So please connect with the National AI Centre. We are doing a lot next year. As you can imagine, there's a lot of work to be done to help Australian businesses understand and adopt AI. I'd also love to just spotlight some of the work that we're doing as part of the Responsible AI Network. We're very, very pleased to be working closely with the AIIA as part of that initiative. And what we are trying to do with this group of organisations is spotlight and showcase the very best materials, events, activities, and resources that we can make available to Australian businesses to help them understand, embrace, use, adopt, and scale responsible AI, and better understand the responsibilities, the risks, but also the opportunities associated with AI. We work with a number of organisations as part of this community, including CEDA, the AI Group, the Ethics Centre, the Tech Council of Australia, Gradient Institute, Standards Australia, and the Human Technology Institute. We were delighted to bring into our community the Governance Institute of Australia, so we'll be doing more with them next year as well. And we are very interested to talk with any additional organisations who might want to work with us to advance this topic here in Australia. As I said, we're very, very pleased to be working with the AIIA. I think it's the one of the oldest technology-focused communities here in Australia. So today's speakers, we're very, very lucky to have an excellent panel for you to enjoy today. We will be hearing today from Simon Bush, who is the CEO of the AIIA. Patrick Mooney, who is the chair of the ESG Policy Advisory Network as part of the AIIA. Walt Coulston, who is the founder and CEO of GreenSquareDC. Fergal Murphy, who's the managing director of Data and AI at Accenture. And we also have a special guest joining us today. So I have the benefit of being able to work closely with Judy Slatyer, amongst many other hats Judy wears. She's also the chair of the New South Wales Net Zero Emissions Clean Economy Board and the lead of the Climate Leaders Coalition as well. So we're delighted to bring you this lineup of speakers today. I hope you enjoy the session. For those people joining the Teams call directly, I would ask you to rejoin using the webcast link because that makes it much easier for us to gather your questions and to interact with you as part of the audience. So please check the link in the chat window and rejoin the webinar using the link in that chat window. Thank you. Now, with no further ado, I will hand over to you, Patrick. Thank you very much.
Actually, I think it's myself, Beth. Is that right?
Oh, my apologies. I'll hand over to you, Simon.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Beth. Simon Bush, CEO of the AIIA. And great to be part of the RAIN. Great initiative today. Before we go into the AIIA's Tech and Sustainability paper that we put out a few months ago, I just want to give some background as to why we developed the paper that we did. So in May last year, we went to the US as a delegation. AIIA runs delegations, and we really heard from tech leaders and businesses that they were really leaning into sustainability issues within the tech sector for a number of reasons. One is that they wanted to have sustainability within their own operations and meeting and beating and exceeding those Paris targets that we have in Australia of being a carbon neutral economy by 2050. So many of the tech companies have actually achieved that already, with many on track to do that by 2030. And we did a major conference in Parliament House on sustainability and what the tech industry is doing end of last year, and that led to the paper being developed with the help and assistance of our wonderful members. So we went to the US again last year. So what a change from May last year to November. What we've seen really is the advent of generative AI becoming into the public consciousness, and the creation of LLMs, and the investment that we're seeing globally is at a scale that we've never experienced before in the tech industry. One data point brings it really to home is Microsoft is investing US $10 billion each and every quarter on their data center expansion, which is really based upon what they're expecting to happen with their M365 and their Copilot rollout. Now, all the software companies, all the tech companies and platform providers are all investing heavily in building Copilots and LLMs. Massive amounts of data, GPU compute, and thus energy and water consumption is required. We heard from AWS, just to give you, again, another data point in terms of the context and size on scale that is occurring. They're investing $15 billion in renewable energy just to fund their data center expansions, right? So it's quite mind-boggling, and we're only at the start of the journey. We're only at sort of version 1 of this generative AI journey that we're on. So the massive energy and water impacts, obviously, the expansion is something that we're thinking deeply about as an industry. It's something that we need to think deeply about. There's a lot of discussion around renewables, about closed loop water recycling. In relation to Microsoft, there's even sort of mooted that there's some new nuclear modular reactor technology that they could be implementing. So it's fascinating to see where this goes. But we are, as an industry, creating these tools, creating these advanced AI tools, but we're also very conscious of the massive energy required to run them. And that is a responsibility on all of us to get that right. So really looking forward to hearing about from our members today in relation to these issues. Just finally, just wanted to sort of talk about the role of government. Government is one of the largest procurers of IT in Australia, and I should believe that government should be an exemplar when it comes to certain areas of IT. One of those is cybersecurity. One of those is AI governance. And thirdly, around ESG compliance and reporting. So we're talking about two of these today, AI and ESG. So there's a nice synergy there. Whilst I think government should be leading in these areas, I believe that they're not. So I think we as an industry have some work to do. Look, they are progressing on a path, but I think they need to hasten their investments and their decision making in those areas. Really looking forward to today's conversation. Thanks to Beth and NAIC for hosting this important topic, and look forward to the conversation. Patrick, can I now please pass to you?
Delighted to be the next link in the chain. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Simon. I don't pretend to be an expert on AI, but I do a lot of work with emerging companies applying AI to sustainability challenges and a range of other emerging sustainable technology companies. And as was mentioned, I'm chairing the ESG Advisory Network, and a major piece of work was the production of the Tech and Sustainability paper. So I'll focus on that, a little bit of an overview of that, and for any in-depth insights, I think you'll benefit from Walt and Fergal and Judy's probably deeper knowledge of AI specifically. So if you can bear with me, I'll just share a little overview of what we did cover in the Tech and Sustainability white paper. So it was very much a member contribution exercise. A lot of contributions from very diverse players in the industry, and coordinated with enormous amount of work, as you could appreciate, by the AIIA team. So very grateful for all those inputs that were made. The scope of it, just so that you understand where it's coming from, was a slightly broader focus on the role of the digital tech sector as a whole in leading the way in assisting Australia to achieve ESG goals. And it falls into three main areas. So one is how the tech sector is aiming to be carbon neutral well before the rest of the economy. And in fact, in many cases already is, because of that pressure on the need for scaling up infrastructure, etc. So people like AWS, I believe it's 2025 that they've indicated they'll be carbon neutral. A number of major IT companies are well ahead of any government targets in that space. But it's also making that visible. And I think that's one of the things that's one of our priorities, is to actually make those initiatives visible and share the learnings from those implementations. The second part of it talks about the role of enterprise tech. And if you look at the high emitting sectors in the economy, this is going to be particularly important, because sectors like transport, construction, and building and energy are very dominated by significant enterprises. So the ability of the tech sector, whether it's corporates, whether it's SMEs, to engage effectively with corporates and help them adjust their business models, in some cases replace their business models, is going to be a pretty key part of it. So the ability to engage and actually understand where industries are heading requires a fair degree of intimacy with those enterprises. And the third area is really focusing on what will the future look like, what sort of skills will we need. So there are a number of case studies within the white paper, and you'll see a link. You'll get a copy of this, but at the top of the heading there is a link to the white paper. Not all of those are about AI. It's a slightly broader prism, but there's also a set of expert interviews, which again I think has some relevant insights in this area. And there is one other AIIA paper which we would recommend you have a look at, which again the link is there. It's called Growing Globally Competitive Industries, and that has a dedicated section on the role of AI more broadly. So these things are coming together, and I guess the focus today really is, what is that nexus between AI and ESG? So we know that tracking and tracing of emissions is a major challenge area in a rapidly growing area. And obviously with the volume of data, the complexity of data, the need to analyze that, the need to identify patterns, identify early failures in systems is going to require significant AI application. And as an example, even already in the energy management sector, households and businesses have reduced their energy consumption by up to 30%. And a lot of that driven by AI powered systems, which we'll talk about a bit later. Then there's obviously the simulation area. So AI is going to be critical to modeling and simulating, and can anticipate complex factors like climate and the evolution of weather systems and what that means in terms of communities and industries such as bushfires and floods. And we've seen the emergence of interesting little companies and solutions in that area, such as FloodMap, which has been very busy in the US and Australia, helping councils and communities to manage around major flood events. But the third area, which probably doesn't get as much recognition, is that AI is actually going to play a role in the adoption of innovation. It's actually enabling a much shorter product life cycle, from design to re-engineering to testing, and then modeling the outcomes of introducing a new product or service. So it's actually going to have an accelerative impact on the adoption of other innovations. And just using an energy management example, again, already it's credited with 65% reduction in emissions from electricity generation because of that ability to model and build in wind and solar into the grid. What's the future going to look like? Actually, AI is already impacting a lot of these sectors. So if we look at sustainable buildings and infrastructure, we're already seeing technologies like Building IQ, which is actually a CSIRO spin-out, where each individual building has a unique thermal footprint. And what that system does is assess how it absorbs and radiates energy, and then automatically adjusts the heating and cooling of that building, and is adjustable in its own right by the management of that building. So that's a good example in that space. There are other systems out there like CIM, which talks to all of the assets in a building, that's heating, cooling systems, etc., and detects whether they're operating outside their normal parameters, and will facilitate the adjustment or replacement of equipment. So there's a lot happening in there. That's a massive growth area. The Singaporean government is investing heavily in both AI but other smart technologies in sustainable cities. Transport area is a big one, and we're already seeing a lot of use of AI in optimization. So companies like Premonition, which is optimizing delivery routes, that's going to be a big area in terms of reducing emissions. And maybe those systems will have more weighting towards emissions. At the moment, they're predominantly focused on costs and margins in delivery chains. Smart grids area, we've already seen a lot of innovation using AI. So solutions like GreenSync, which effectively turns the energy network into an internet of connected nodes, and other companies like Future Grid, which at the edge of the grid enable it to interact intelligently with consumers and businesses, but also generation sources, and adapt intelligently to lightning strike, a failure, a cloud going over that particular part of the community, etc. So we're already seeing a lot of those coming in. One rapid growth area will be in the precision monitoring of compliance. Big factor to address there for the industry is trust, of course. Investors and managers want to trust the monitoring and assessment systems that are going to be out there, and that they're not compromised. So that's going to be a major area for AI. And obviously in climate and emergency management, we have some great little companies in that area. I've mentioned FloodMap. Unfortunately, we're pretty good at emergency management. We're perhaps not so good at planning and forecasting it, and that is an area that's also beginning to develop. And we're already seeing AI applied in management of water and land. Many of you would know a little company called RegrowAg, which is a Ukrainian-Australian founder. It's now mostly based in the US, but it takes satellite and drone image data and allows farmers to understand what their water and chemical content is on their properties, and actually have a kind of a real-time management of the sustainability of that land. So those are just examples of things that are in the AI space that are already happening in those sectors. And given that those are all very high emitting sectors, there's a lot of potential on the upside. But as already has been highlighted, there is a bit of a downside with AI. And there's the University of Massachusetts indicated that training just one NLP model was equivalent in emissions to 125 round-trip flights between New York and Beijing which is a pretty scary statistic. And in terms of water, another university found that ChatGPT-3, the training of that, the amount of water used was equivalent to that in the manufacture of between 300 and 400 vehicles. So that's obviously a major conundrum for AI, that the rapid adoption can help us address these ESG opportunities. But the rapid adoption is actually creating this demand for data centers. And I think you'll hear a very interesting story from Walt about how we can respond to that in a sustainable way. So the recommendations in the Tech and Sustainability Report, as I said, they're not specifically about AI, but there are a number that impact AI or interact with AI. So I'll just highlight those. The third recommendation is about measuring and reporting environmental impacts of digitisation of government services, which is happening extensively federally and at the state level. Obviously, AI is going to be required to deal with the volume, interpretation, and hopefully reporting in a transparent way of what is actually occurring. Recommendation 6 talks about government sharing data with industry. So there's an example in Victoria called C4Net, where energy consumption data across the state is made available, depersonalised, but made available to SMEs and corporates to model, and research organisations to model and develop solutions. And some of the new products in that area have been able to use that as a simulation environment. Recommendation 8 talks, as Simon highlighted, as the government to be an exemplar in a number of areas, but one is assessing and reporting the impact of its own procurements and its own projects. And that, again, will require significant amounts of data and AI-supported analysis. An interesting one is number 9, which talks about the National Robotics Strategy and applying robotics and AI to disaster management, preparedness and recovery, and environmental efficiencies in agriculture. We've also, number 10 talks about incorporating world-leading applications of AI and IoT, which go closely together in areas like infrastructure and mining to help reduce emissions and maintain assets and support, again, disaster management. An interesting one was number 11, which talked about sustainability, studying the sustainability impacts jointly of emerging tech like large language models and ensuring that the sustainability goals are incorporated in the execution of national strategies on quantum and AI, because these are very powerful forces, and if they're not working in sync, we could be magnifying the scale of the problem that we're facing. So it's very important that those forces are aligned. And number 14 was, again, not specifically about AI, but it's really about skills mapping and training, and clearly building some skill base in AI is important. And I think that if it complements the development of a genuine industry in quantum, those two things together could put Australia in a very strong position, given the strength of our quantum, at least basics research. To combine that with AI puts us in a very strong position. So the case studies, there are a number in the report. I won't go through them all, and some of them you'll hear about shortly. One is by Deloitte, and it's called Dr. Sat, and it provides information to farmers to help them understand their own climate risks and take action to manage and build their resilience. And that includes farm-level climate projections, commodity and region-specific information, and it's also giving them economic and financial personalised support. So that's a very immediate use of AI. And then Kyndryl, with its own customer base, has been modelling Scope 3 emissions of customers. So it's actually built a platform using AI and automation to map that for itself and its customers, so that, you know, a whole ecosystem can be modelled. We'll hear more from Walt about GreenSquare, you know, given that challenge we talked about, and the very exciting things that they're doing for AI-ready data centres. And I think we'll hear a little bit from Fergal. I think it's this one, Fergal, but maybe I'm wrong, about the work with the Institute of Marine Science on modelling around reefs and helping to preserve our very vulnerable and valuable reefs. And there are others in there, but there's one around supply chain sustainability with SAP and Lions. That again has already had a significant impact in terms of material costs and service levels. So I won't spend any more time on that. Thank you for the opportunity just to provide a little bit of an overview. And I hope I've still got the ability to de-share.
Thank you, Patrick. So I think, are we hearing first from you, Fergal, in regard to the work that was alluded to with your marine science project?
I'm happy to go first, Beth. I think I've got a few minutes, so I'll just may as well share. And thank you for the invite. I think it's a pleasure to present with the broader team here today. I think for those of us working at the intersection of data and AI and other important things, and I think sustainability is certainly very high on my priority list. So this brings two passions together for me. I'll speak quickly about this case study, and this has been a journey we've been on with the Australian Institute of Marine Science since 2019, when it started as a meeting of sort of the AI hackathon that we were running at the time, and the AIMS team who were looking for a means to deal with the digitization or scaling the digitization of marine science. Just to frame the problem they were looking to solve, the coral reefs, or the rainforests of the sea, as we sometimes call them, the AIMS team were saying that 75% of our coral reefs across the globe are severely threatened by climate change and chronic pollution. And that's even worse when we consider that those reefs support 25% of marine species and are the food source for 500 million people. So, this is certainly a major attention project for us, and we've been on the journey since then. And really the goal was to try and support AIMS with the use of AI to address a modern way to look at global reef monitoring. And the thing to note about reef monitoring is it's a very visual science. I think you can tell a lot from looking at the reef in terms of bleaching, in terms of invasive pests and general health. So really we brought sort of those AI capabilities in that area and kicked off the journey with AIMS. And that collaboration focused around how do we help address this, and we tackled it from two directions. The first thing we did with AIMS was to empower them for the scientific capabilities that they need as an institution. And the second thing we needed to do was to say, how do we then engage? One of the key challenges in this space is how do you engage the broader population and bring people on that journey and make it clear how urgent this challenge is. So that was the Kickstarter for our journey. And what we did was tackle the 3 Ds of the science in this area. They had a challenge in activity that was dull or dangerous, or divided, and I'll tackle each of those in turn. So the dull work is, as we move them to an AI model, there are millions and millions of data points across, again, many photos. They went to a photographic AI model, but a lot of the dull work is trying to see lots of sand pictures on the bottom, or lots of things that aren't very interesting. They used AI to speed up the scientific process to get through all that data. And what they've managed to do is in the data collection and data processing of the work they need to do, they've found a means to make that on average 700 times faster. So that gives the scientific community much more time to focus on using the science rather than preparing the science. And the AI that we put behind this is 80 to 90% accurate. So you can think about sort of the accuracy at scale that they can now accomplish in days what used to take them months or possibly years. So this Reef Cloud, it's actually live. You can see it as a platform. It encourages collaboration. So we dealt with the divided nature of this science because of all the global participants. The reefcloud.ai is a platform that you can find on the web. It monitors 5,000 sites globally. It's got about 2.5 million photos in there across 80 countries. So there's about 1,500 active scientific collaborators now using that, and I'd encourage everybody to get out there and see this tool in action. So if you're going on a holiday to Palau or Fiji or the Solomons or Vanuatu or the Maldives or even up to our own Great Barrier Reef, I'd please take your underwater camera with you. bring those images back to the platform, log on to reefcloud.ai, and you can help AIMS in the pursuit of improving the science here. So that's a quick summary of work that we're very proud of doing, and it's certainly something that we're seeing now leading to better advances in how science is used. And we've helped, one of the things that the modeling that you see in reefcloud.ai now as a platform, we've helped Tuvalu to actually build the first digital model of their island. So there's actually a 3D representation for an island that's probably going to be underwater very soon. They've actually created a digital model using the same tech and AI. So looking to use this for more sustainability initiatives in the future. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this one today.
That's such an incredible example of where AI and technology is able to help scientists accelerate this work. Thank you so much. I know I won't be the only person checking out that website, and certainly it's great if anyone's heading that way over the summer holidays. Walt, we would love to hear from you with GreenSquareDC.
GreenSquareDC, thank you.
Tell us a little bit about this case study, and I know that this is a colliding of passions for you in terms of technology and sustainability, so I'd love to hear a bit more.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for the platform. I think this is great. I'm loving everything that NAIC is doing. This is it's also new. We're in the first innings. This is really still day one, isn't it? I thought Patrick framed the pros and cons, and I think it's important. There's plenty of both out there with what AI can bring to the table, and I think it's important from government down. We don't just focus on the the pros. We've got to look at the opportunities and the costs, and we've got to look at both. So anyway, look. GreenSquareDC, we're a new addition to the data center industry here in Australia. We have our initial project in Perth in Belmont. It's a DA approved 96 megawatt data center there, and we also have a project coming up in both Sydney and Melbourne. We sort of
You've just gone on mute, Walt. That happened to me.
Yeah, that's funny, isn't it? I swear I'm not pressing it. Anyway, we wanted to be differentiated from the get-go, and we wanted to be differentiated very much from a sustainability perspective. We could see that with all that was happening with decarbonisation, that decarbonisation is going to affect all of us, so all of our waking lives, right? And certain industries, I think the heavier the emitter, the more impact it's going to have. And data centers are a heavy emitter and very much power, and I think water is the next battleground. Patrick picked up on that. They consume an inordinate amount of water in the traditional sense, the way they've traditionally been engineered and cooled. So we started off with we've got a 5 pillars to sustainability model. There's certain things we either do or do not do. We don't use diesel fossil fuels in operation. We have zero wastewater with a goal of being water positive. We want to use renewable energy, but we actually, further than that, we want to be a net positive energy consumer. We want to be involved in the creation of more renewable power directly than we consume. And our example for Perth is we've got a very long-term lease on 3,100 hectares of land at a place called East Hyden, where it's both very windy and very sunny. And we don't see ourselves being the developer, owner, and operator of that wind and solar farm, but we want to be involved in the creation of it. We have quite a fear that moving forward, towards the back end of this decade, if we're just using Australia as the example, as we transition from our fossil fuel power generation, and our coal burners, as I call them, to variable renewable power at the same time that the world is generally electrifying. There's going to be, there's more electric cars, there's all these kind of things, right? And our fear is that power is really going to be at a premium towards the back end of this decade. And I mean all power, I mean grid power, renewable power. Personally, I just don't think there's going to be enough of it. And I think the data center industry, I think we're on our way to consuming 10% plus of the global grid by the end of the decade. And I just, the solution of late has been, let's just go and rely on PPAs. Let's go and get other people's renewables. We can see moving forward that power is going to be prioritized, not necessarily just for people to watch cat videos and, you know, via the data center, right? We can see, and there's already been examples of this in Europe, where some big hyperscalers have gone forward with big campus, you know, DA approvals to get approval. They're being knocked back because the local government has said, or the government has said, no, that power should be prioritized towards schools and houses and hospitals and not necessarily your data centers. So that's our strategy. That's our way of doing it. And we want to make sure that as we move through different regions and different areas, we can be involved in the creation of more direct renewables that we will end up being a PPA, but at least we'll create our own. So we're creating more than we consume. So just on, and then the other part of our differentiation was always around density. We wanted to be a higher density, a HPC, data center operator, and so we were designing for a higher power, higher density sort of engineered solution for a good 12 months before we, like the rest of the world, found out about ChatGPT 3. And since then, that has been a real game changer, hasn't it? So before that, you know, GPU as a service, GPU enabled data centers was very much a niche thing, right? Now it's mainstream. So there's a whole new market segment out there, and the market was already very busy. So with traditional cloud computing and just traditional data centers, we went and did a bit of a over a month study tour in North America and throughout Asia, just to go and make sure that this is real, that we could see and understand the impacts that's happening. And my Lord, it is very real. We're not really seeing the adoption out here as yet, which is interesting, but I'm sure it's coming. And speaking to the NVIDIAs and the AMDs of the world, you know, their sales are huge and very robust elsewhere, but so far not so much here. An example is in a 90-day period up until about, and this was going back to about August in North America, there was 2.1 gigawatts of committed power, which is a lot of power, committed to data centers, and the vast majority of that was AI related. So again, it's very real. This new market segment, so this GPU enabled market segment, that's the specific field GreenSquareDC is going to play in, because we're already engineered for that before we knew it was really a thing. It's really the design, the cooling, the engineering, the networking, everything is different. The data center might look the same on the outside, but on the inside, it's completely different to a traditional sort of cloud compute based data center. And it's fundamentally around power. And a data center, if you really just want to dumb it down, it's like power in and heat out. And that's what you're doing. It's, you're putting an oven in a fridge. So traditional cloud compute data centers at a rack level, you went into the computer room and you saw your 42RU rack. They were sort of at about a 6 to 8 to maybe 10 kilowatts a rack. GPUs, the current, if you're enabling the current NVIDIA GPUs, you're at around 45 kilowatts a rack. The next generation, which is coming out next year, is about 75 kilowatts a rack, and then it goes to 100 kilowatts. So from a cooling environment, it's completely different. But so that's the conundrum to be resolved, and that's not easy. It's a liquid cooled solution, so it's all quite different. But what that means, though, is when there's so much more power consumed, well, therefore, if it's a 5 to 10x increase in power, hey, it's a 5 to 10x increase in that potential environmental footprint. And that's one of the conundrums to be solved. And then, because there's way more, the water consumption, if it's done the traditional way, is way bigger as well. And I found in the early stages, the industry as a whole, I found, and I'm sort of saying the AI industry, not necessarily the data center industry, we're all getting very excited about the solutions that AI can provide for us because of its unbelievable compute capabilities, which is 100% true. But we were skipping over the foundational problem, which is these things are always created in a data center or a supercomputer, and those two things are going to meld. Moving forward, these data centers will be supercomputers. We was forgetting that the impact to create these large language models, that create the AI, we're forgetting about that. And I think that's really important, because the AI will have to be very smart. If we keep doing it the traditional way, the impact is going to be so large that the AI there'll be a lot of problems to solve. So that's our solutions and our 5 pillars to sustainability and our waterless design, our net positive energy consumption strategy and things like that. That's our response. It's been very well received by the market so far, which is great. And we're just really great. We're blessed to be part of the community. So that's our little overview.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Judy, I'd love to hear from you, actually. In your role is leading a number of these conversations, both across New South Wales and nationally. Do you think that the benefits of AI are outweighing the potential environmental harms, particularly as we start to think about the widespread adoption of AI solutions?
My answer to that is massively outweighing.
Mm-hmm.
We're on a path to 2.7, 2.8 degrees of warming as a planet, probably more actually by the time we look at the lack of outcomes out of COP28. That has terrible implications for us as people, for the economy, for society, and for the planet. And therefore, we need scale, speed, and the ability to find ways to do things we've never done before. And AI presents a remarkable opportunity to help with those 3 things. Patrick was fantastic presentation, Patrick, on talking about all the different possible ways, whether you look at it as the heaviest of emitting sectors, how AI can play a role in transport, for example, with better planning, better route choices, or with shifting to a distributed energy world where every Australian is an energy contributor and producer, not just a receiver, and how to use AI to facilitate and manage that, through to things like in agriculture and using computer recognition and machine learning and drones to really target the use of fertilizer, which of course is one of the biggest causes of emission. So a fantastic presentation of all the possible ways. But then secondly, also looking at, as we shift this world and move, 200 years of industrial environments to a low carbon economy, we're also going to have to be really nimble and really adaptable, because there will be all sorts of things bubbling up, opportunities and issues that we're not aware of. And again, getting savvy with AI and using it regularly is key. And Fergal's example was fantastic at that. How do you save scientists time? What was it, 700%? Or something, massive time saver. So scientists can be doing their job on what it's going to take to help the reef revitalise. And similarly with Walt's presentation, starting to do things we've never done before, using AI to help it. So I actually believe the use of, wherever you look, whether it's heaviest emitted sectors, whether it's particular applications of different forms of AI, or whether it's the ability to become a much more adaptive, resilient economy and society, I think AI actually is a critical part of our answer in all of those. We have to, of course, manage it responsibly and be really good at assessing what could go wrong, what are the issues or the ESG issues associated with it. But I feel AI is a big part of the solution.
Yeah. That's a fantastic summary, Judy. Thank you so much. And as you were talking and I was reflecting on Fergal's presentation, it's very telling how AI is going to augment all of our roles and perhaps no more so important than the role of scientists in accelerating their work. Fergal, in your role, are you seeing a lot of those conversations around the augmenting of jobs and skills? And I'd love to bring in Patrick and Simon, because I know that your report on technology and sustainability did talk a lot about that change of green skills and jobs that we're starting to see. But Fergal, I'd love your thoughts.
Yeah, sure, Beth. I think let me kickstart this one. I think we've done sort of research globally in this space, and different industries. I think we're seeing different impacts, but on average, about 40% of work across the industries is destined to be kind of adjusted in that augmented fashion. So I think we're starting to see that. I think we're a lot of co-pilot, a lot of augment and assist. I think is where we're going to see the bulk of the impact in that space. And really for us, there's some concerns about that. I would sort of say that's certainly out there, but certainly for me, I think it's the opportunity side that's, you know, the upside opportunity is not to be balked at. I think just to give an example, I think the you know, in some of the resources industries that are, you know, quite polluting, I think we're seeing, you know, the ability to make that more efficient can reduce immediately the impact on emissions. So, you know, we're seeing, you know, 10x, 100x type of losses. You know, when you do things like commissioning new equipment and assets, you know, a lot of escaped and fugitive emissions. You know, we're seeing that, you know, rather than it taking 4 days to commission something that's pumping out emissions, you can take that down to 2 or 3 hours. So we're really sort of looking at closing the gaps, using that augmented tech to really close the gaps in immediately solving some of the challenges out there in this emission space. So yeah, happy to.
Yeah, thank you. And Simon and Patrick, I know the report did touch on this green skills opportunity for Australia. What are your reflections on what that report told us, and how can Australians really prepare our workforce for these types of jobs and the skills that they need?
I'm happy to sort of start off, and then Patrick,
Sure.
you can sort of respond specifically perhaps to the report. Look, it's really interesting. We always believe there's going to be human in the loop when it comes to decision making. And that's that transparency piece with AI that's really important. There is also a war for AI talent, and we heard that in the US, and they're interesting. A lot of the big tech companies are recruiting people from other fields like anthropologists and psychologists, and bringing them into AI to help with bringing broader perspectives into decision making, which I think is really interesting and also important. The other observation is an AI won't necessarily replace your job, but a human that understands AI and uses it probably will. So I think that's a really interesting perspective around always being curious and retraining. Having said that, is it ironic? Perhaps it is, that software engineers are probably the most likely to be replaced by AI. Another data point, because we learned a few on our trip, was that by 2025, 85% of all apps will be developed in part or wholly by AI. So there you go. And there's a massive amount of research and pilots that have been done by Westpac and others in relation to the efficiency and productivity benefits that AI brings to software engineering, in particular in coding. So look, I will sort of pause there, and Patrick, and specifically around green jobs and AI.
Yes, and one of the recommendations is you know, to map the existing skill base and the future skill base, and maybe that's another application of AI to actually help us understand that emerging, you know, picture where the gaps will be. I think there will be, and it's obviously going to be an area that will change rapidly over time. There will be opportunities, I think, in you know, software design, particularly around you know, in terms of jobs in areas to do with the interface between AI and humans, you know, so helping humans, you know, to adopt tools that allow them to manage AI effectively in their particular industry or sector. And I think there'll be a growth effectively in almost the training sector in that area. So helping people who are non-expert to effectively use AI in their particular work environment, you know, that will be a growth area, certainly in the early stages. And I think that, you know, as we've already touched on, that sort of monitoring and compliance area, that is a growth area, and that requires human input to actually define what is important to monitor, you know, and how do you build in that trust element. I don't see AI completely solving that piece, but got to, you know, interact with that. So I think there are certainly a lot of opportunities there, and fundamentally it's about, you know, looking forward and how will humans continue to use AI in a productive and safe way, and that I think is where a lot of the job opportunities will be.
Thank you, Patrick. I know often I look to Singapore and their commitment to lifelong learning, and I think that's what we all must kind of look to. Well, we've got a question for you, just in relation to your fantastic summary of the current setup that you have. But how does the Australian economy enable, or perhaps not make it more difficult for you in terms of how you've set up that business model? Are there things that could help scale the energy efficiency of data centers more broadly, or are you sort of swimming against the tide at the moment? Will that change?
If I'm being brutally honest, there is, I see one of the limiting factors for Australia. And Australia, Sydney and Melbourne, from a pure data center perspective, have done very well. Sydney has gone from a nascent emerging market in 2016-17. It's now the 6th biggest data center market in the world.
Amazing,
so it's
wow.
and Melbourne's kind of on its way. So we can't sit here and say that nothing has happened, and we do have to be careful. One thing I will say is that every single one of the original, like, early movers that became the top 10 of the global data center markets, all one way or another are paying penance for their unbridled overdevelopment of unsustainable data centers. You know, we've seen in Singapore have the moratorium. Dominion Energy in North Virginia, which is the biggest data center market on earth, has just said late last year, no one's getting any more power till at least 2027 because they're running out of power. Ireland's had problems, Amsterdam, everyone. So we've got to be really careful about that. And we're starting to see government make appropriate moves, which is really good. So, but if there is a limiting factor, it's the availability of power. A data center without power is not much fun. And if you look at regionally, and it's a big global market we're in, Western Australia in particular, I'm very fond of the Western Australian market. The Western Australia market should be a global powerhouse for generative AI. And particularly for training these large language models. Why? Because WA's got some of the cheapest power on earth. It's irrefutable. It's very stable. There's lots like its availability of renewables is in order. You know, is incredible. But then you go to Western Power, and I don't know whether I should name, but they're the power utility, right? And you go to them and you say, hey, we need we'd like power and make an application, and yes, we're doing our own renewables as well, and their time frame can be like 3 to 5 years, and when I say 3, I mean more towards 5. Malaysia, on the other hand, who gets there participating in a global market, their national utility came out earlier in the year and said, anyone who makes a data center application, we guarantee maximum 12 months for a power connection. So we can't, you know what I mean? So that's why Malaysia and Johor in particular is like NVIDIA just agreed to invest $4 billion to build out a big, supercomputer there. That should be happening in Western Australia. And it's not. And part of the reason being is because our utilities, we can't get out of the way of ourselves. And we know that we can't, like, utilities are under a lot of stress. They're dealing with lots of issues, right? And data centers is one of them. They're transitioning, and the grid's under a lot of stress. So we kind of understand why, but it would be nice if we could find a pathway or a solution, even if it's a user-paid solution, right? Because that's a really big limiting factor.
Yeah, it's a really interesting observation, Walt. And I guess when we think about this in the Australian context, of course, we have to think much more broadly, given this is a global marketplace. There are a number of questions that have come through, and I wish we had more time today. But this particular question is really interesting in as much as it speaks to the small and medium-sized business challenge. What opportunities do you see available to small and medium businesses? Now, we know that the Minister announced a big program around small, medium businesses and AI last week, which is fantastic. What could they do to start thinking about embracing AI, but particularly as it relates to helping to either reduce their environmental impact or kind of manage their environmental impacts? I'd love to hear from you, Patrick and Simon.
Okay. You want to kick off, Simon? Or, yep.
I'm happy to have a crack.
Yep.
Certainly, I mean, that announcement you referred to, Minister Husick, we helped announce that. I co-announced that with him on Friday, which is fantastic, which is $17 million towards AI adopt centres, which is really trying to solve the issue that's been identified more recently by two reports, actually, that shows that adoption of these powerful AI tools, and they are incredibly powerful productivity drivers for the economy and for businesses, we rank second last in both of those two global assessments of where Australia stands. So
things can't get worse.
Well, we can go down one layer. So look, in one sense, you can go, we're doing really poorly, but if you want to be glass half full, you go, well, there's an opportunity, right? There's an opportunity for us to go up the pecking order and to adopt these generative AI tools and increase the productivity benefits. And I mentioned that Westpac example earlier. I know it's a big corporate. I'll come back to SMEs. They did 45% of 50% of their coders in a pilot of their software engineers use generative AI for coding, and they had the other 50% not use generative AI. They found there's a 45% productivity efficiency from their software engineers. You apply that across the economy, you're starting to get an understanding of the efficiency dividend and productivity dividend. Interestingly, the co-pilots that Microsoft and everyone else is going to be rolling out co-pilots, I think they're powerful, and I think businesses need to understand how they're going to utilize these within their business. Think of the case studies and the use cases within their organizations. Be curious and learn. But I think collectively as a tech industry, we need to put our hand up and support the transition to use these tools. I can't really put my finger on why we're such a slow adopter. Normally with technology, Australia is sort of towards the top when it comes to consumer adoption of technology. Why enterprises and SMEs have been slow, I'm not 100% certain, and maybe there's other observations from others on the call as to why, but to me it's an opportunity.
Yeah, I agree, Simon. I think it's there's an opportunity perhaps a bit, if I may say so, some closer engagement between research agencies and SMEs in this space. SMEs really don't have the resources in particular time to inform themselves of what's happening, in this area. But if you can create safe environments, whether they're called adopt centres or whether they're almost what's the term, sandpits, within research agencies, where an SME can go in with a coach perhaps and just try some applications that relate to their sector, so that they can get a bit of a feel for what's possible. It needs to be an informed guidance, somebody who sort of understands a retail business or a mining business or, manufacturing business. I think there's a lot of scope, and I actually think it's a benefit to scientists to have that interaction too. I think that's a really important element. So, that infrastructure is there. We've got a very powerful research and testing infrastructure in the country. So I think that's one very important area. The other is telling the stories. There's nothing like a bit of competitive pressure. If somebody hears that somebody else in their sector has used AI to get an edge, well, let's get those case studies out there, whether it's through the associations or some other mechanism, but really highlight. And, that's certainly something that AIIA has done is to build case studies into the story, But I think particularly with SMEs, to say, look, this is how a business like yours made a huge difference, and they're now exporting in 3 additional markets, but it needs that sort of almost competitive pressure, I think, to do
nothing like a bit of competition. And as a South Australian, I'm already thinking about how we can possibly beat Western Australia to become the data centre champion of the world. But thank you so much.
If I could add to that, I mean, I've worked with a few universities, and one of the hardest things for SMEs to find is where all those assets are, where they can get something tested, where they can get a bit of specialist advice. So, around this area, perhaps something could be some sort of roadmap. So this is how you engage with UNSW or CSIRO on this topic, who'll help you through some scenarios in your sector. And maybe,
Yeah, and as luck would have it, those are some of the things that we will be working on as part of the National AI Centre. So for anyone interested in that, please get in touch with us. Thank you again for your time and participation today. I think we heard how much that the benefit of AI and technology outweighs the environmental impact of the industry, but acknowledging that we need to better manage and reduce our own impact. Well, thank you so much for the excellent example that you provided. I think your efforts are an exemplar for Australia and for the world, and it's great to hear about that. Virgil, thank you so much for sharing some of the ways that you've been helping to accelerate this incredible work of conservation, and I think we're all inspired to check out that website. Simon and Patrick, thank you again for sharing your report. We'll make sure that everyone has a link to that report after this event. And Judy, thank you very much for your words of wisdom and for joining us today as our special guest. We would love to hear from you at the National AI Centre, so please do get in touch if you'd like any more information about our programs or the ways in which you can get involved to support our work. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.